Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, guys, everyone, for coming for this panel. Thank you, our esteemed guests and the panelists coming on this for this panel. And very good afternoon to you. Today's session, it is all about remittances and the conquering the cross-border business challenges. I'll start with a brief. I'll be standing here and allowing the panel to address us with the secrets, how they are going to conquer the challenges on the cross-border remittances. So if I say the cross-border payment systems are evolving and there's still enough and more that needs to be solved to achieve an utopian state for seamless cross-border remittances. For most of the challenges that get cited are with regards to the time it takes for the money to be sent, like cost efficiencies, transparency, regulatory policy enhancements, etc. One of the solutions that global ecosystem is waking up to create cross-border linkages with RTP, that's real-time payment solutions, whether it's bilateral or multilateral. While this is a good approach to take, the discussion on topic today goes beyond and obvious, and we expect to hear from the esteemed panel on the perspectives that they feel they are equally cited as challenges and if it is resolved for. Can create seamless experiences for cross-border payments backed with the technology and processes innovation. This space is fast evolving with banks, fintechs, payments, regional network gaining momentum and mindshare, it helping resolve some of the challenges. To my mind, it is vital that all stakeholders come together to collaborate and promote a cohesive approach and attract users to the platform for scale. This essentially would mean the regulators, fintechs, big techs, network which enable efficient domestic payments and settlements to come together to pave the way for efficient and low-cost real-time cross-border payments. We are privileged today to have with us the diverse and distinguished set of speakers who are playing a key role in this objective in their respective field of play. Let's hear from them and what lies ahead. So may I request the panelists starting from Mr. Ambar to give a brief introduction to the audience as we get started with my question following. So Mr. Sur, the G20 has made an enhancing cross-border payments priority. Would you like to throw some lights on the building blocks, the challenges, and the enablers that you see from a fintech's perspective, because you are enabling multiple countries to ease of the challenges on cross-border challenges backed with the technology and platform-led innovation? Sir.
Thank you, Nehal. Thank you, Nehal. For us, TerraPay is a B2B cross-border payments provider. We work with the likes of the largest cross-border remittance companies, the guys like Western Union, MoneyGram, Wise, all of them. And we enable their transactions. So chances are you walked into a shop in Dubai and asked, at the Al Fardan shop that I want to send money to India via Western Union. Western Union probably hands over the money to me, and it gets deposited to your bank in India, in Philippines, Africa, anywhere. So that's a brief intro on TerraPay. But as far as G20 is concerned and what we're trying to achieve there, yes, the larger objective is to reduce the cost of remittances. And we're seeing it gradually come down. And in my view, there are several factors to it. One is the cost of cash, right? The cost of carrying cash, collecting cash, moving cash is very high. So that some of the numbers you see, the 6-7% is related to what does it cost to carry cash. I mean, we've seen during the COVID times that, some of that disappeared and moved digital. We got some efficiencies out of that. But when you look at a cash transaction, really what is happening, somebody walks into a store. There is a storefront, there are people handling the cash, counting the cash, giving you a rate, writing things down, physically verifying your ID, all of that. And then the money moves across channels, could be channels such as myself, to a destination country like India, Vietnam, wherever, where again, assume somebody goes and withdraws the cash. So that agent has to have cash with him within store hours. Imagine it's a remote location. It's like filling up an ATM in a remote location. Cash has to be there. All that is very expensive, right? So that really needs to get addressed. From a digital side, all of us are doing our best, but economies need to work harder to move this money digital, right? That's the biggest challenge I feel. Other challenges are there. I mean, you look at it from a cross-border things, there is two aspects of it where there's the large value and then there's the small value. Large value typically goes to the bank. If you're sending more than $1,000, $2,000, it will go to the bank. The small value, how does that move? It needs to be instant. Those are challenges that we face. And of course, there are other schemes that are coming up, like the difference between banks and wallets. Wallets are sometimes more efficient in carrying this money than banks in terms of blue-collar payments and things like that. So those are some of the things I look at, and there are today more payment instruments available to us to enable this transfer, and we're working towards it. The other thing you look at is we all talk about money transfer between Dubai to India, okay, or UK to India. These are the old traditional cross-border markets. Dubai to India exists for the last 40, 50 years. It's so well oiled, nobody makes money off it. I mean, in any case, in an India transaction, India Fintech is very difficult to make money. So hats off to the people who are doing that. And of course, hats off to NPCI for making such a good infrastructure that it's really seamless. It's so easy to do it. But, so those traditional corridors are typically not very expensive. You do that, digital, not very expensive. Where we get hit is the non-traditional corridors, like let's say India, Bangladesh. We know how many people are here, India, Nepal, India, Sri Lanka. These regional cross-border remittances is what suffers. We don't focus on that. Same, you look at South Africa to Zimbabwe, South Africa to Mozambique, Vietnam, Laos, Indonesia, Malaysia. Those corridors are sometimes don't exist. Smaller value, blue-collared workers, which we need to work out, which adds to the G20 number. Thanks.
Great. I think you had highlighted the three important areas: the dealing in cash, the transaction, the value, the transaction limit, and the regional payments, which is very important. And I could see in some the direction you're pointing out towards the regulator. So we'll come to that. Over to Mr. Yan. With a brief introduction from your side, I want you to know the Etihad payments, right? As a regulator entity operated by real-time payment system, ANI, in UAE, with the members, could you help us with the brief on the role that you play in the interbank payments and clearing? The purpose of clearing between banks and logically extend it to the cross-border payment scenario for the benefit to all. Do you see the challenges in affecting cross-border fund settlement, vice versa local settlements?
That's a lot. Thank you. So first of all, good afternoon. I also wanted to recognize you because on Friday afternoon to still be here, I think that's amazing. But then I also saw a lot of very familiar faces. So I think it's more also maybe when you see so many CEOs trying to conquer something, we have a lot of colleagues who are just worried that we're going to come up with some new ideas. But anyway, thank you for being here. So Etihad Payments, yes, we are a relatively new company. So Emirates, the UAE now has a national payments company like NPCI in India. So when we grow up, hopefully we will produce also so many innovations like you guys. But you mentioned one thing we have done is we launched a local or domestic instant payment solution called ANI. And I need to correct you probably on one thing, and I believe it has linkages to what we are talking about around cross-border. You called it an interbank clearing. And one big difference of ANI is it's actually a fully inclusive system. So my team has spent last year or longer onboarding all kinds of financial institutions. So in the UAE, it doesn't matter if you have a wallet, if you have a salary card, prepaid salary card, or if you have more traditional bank account. All these financial institutions are connected to ANI and they can transact seamlessly. And that's a big change, right? Because if wallet or a salary card can transfer money easily to a bank account and vice versa within 10 seconds, I think that's changing kind of the first and last mile when it comes to the cross-border payments. Of course, ANI does other things which are very convenient, like QR codes, request to pay, proxies, and all of that stuff. Now, to cross-border. So cross-border has been, and I was in South Africa before, and we were doing something together with TerraPay, and I think it's still going on. But cross-border has been a topic for a very long time, and I've had a couple of discussions even during this event. I just feel that we still are stuck with the narrative which needs to change. So you talk about banks, and kind of sometimes people talk about SWIFT and taking long time. And exactly, as Ambar said, I don't believe there are actually many consumer payments still going through SWIFT as a one-on-one, right? Most of the things you described when workers or migrant workers are sending money home, I don't think it's going through SWIFT, and I don't think it's going through banks anymore, right? And just to give you an example, when I landed in India, I opened a one wallet with UPI. As foreigners, we can now have UPI in India, which is fantastic. And of course, you need to cash in, right? So you can use your credit card or debit card, and it tells you kind of nice, hefty surcharge on Forex and a little bit of additional fees to put money there. However, because I'm from UAE and we have ANI now, I went to one of the wallet providers in the UAE. I will not say who it is, but there are few, one of them. And I could send money from that wallet to my UPI handle, which was open on the tourist wallet, in real time. When you look at the exchange rate, it was 2 rupee cents, you call it like paisas, or yeah, different from the mid-exchange rate announced by the regulator. So perfect exchange rate. And the fee was, I think, less than $2, right? And they give you a couple of transfers for free a month. So I did that, and I didn't have to put any IBANs or anything like that. It was just my UPI handle. It came back, you are sending money to Jan, so you have kind of a level of security. And then when you make the transfer, literally within 2 seconds, my UPI wallet popped up. You have money here, right? And there are many other providers who, their fee is even lower than 2 USDs. So what I'm trying to say here is, especially for the corridors which are, busy and kind of more traditional, I'm not saying that we have solved cross-border payments in the UAE. Definitely not. But I think the challenges which are remaining to be conquered are very different. And I have been saying for a long time, first step is really to solve your domestic problem. And now because of ANI, I could actually populate this wallet with a provider in real time from my bank account and choose the best offer the market has for me when I want to make the transfer, right? And I don't have to have a bank account. I can have my salary card. I can have my wallet. And those are the changes I think something like ANI brings, that the people are not stuck with the bank account where the salary comes, right? You can really easily decide who should be the provider of this service. So it works to increase competition, and I think what now we have to do, and we are not a regulator, we are owned by the central bank, but we operate as a regulated entity. We have few little other things we need to sort for, I think, the corridors which are less common and things. So anyway.
Great. I think 2 important things that you brought out: the level playing fields, the connecting the entire ecosystem, and the challenging question, the ecosystem, the domestic payment has to be ready. Carrying on that to Ms. Maha, okay, coming over to you, just wanted to understand from the multilateral remittance platform, Mr. Ian did highlight to connecting 2 systems, what we are talking about the multilateral. So Ms. Maha, would you and your team at BIS Innovation Hub have been instrumental in driving Nexus, the multilateral instant payment blueprint? And we understand that 5 countries in Asia region, including India, now have agreed to work with your team to bring Nexus into live implementation. How are you seeing this initiative evolve in times to come, and how does the multilateral approach to the instant payment interlinking compared with the bilateral approach? Would you like to highlight the efficiencies and the benefits of this model in a brief?
Thank you. I'll also add my thanks to all of you for being here, to the GFF for inviting us. It's a topic I think that has really kind of prevailed in the conference. So I hope you're not hearing the same thing in this panel as you've heard in others. But before I answer that particular question, I'd like to reflect on what my fellow panelists started with, which is, there's a reason why we keep talking about cross-border payments and, the challenges. And we talk about the G20, for example, targets around cross-border payments of, speed, cost, transparency, and access. They're really kind of high-level words. It's very dynamic and different depending on what market you're in, what jurisdiction, what type of transactions, what are the dynamics in that particular space. So, it could be the cost to cross-border payments or payments more generally could be about cash. Compliance, we think, is a big component of that cost. For cross-border payments, we think FX clearing and settlement is also a layer. And frankly, in some markets, just sheer volume for the business case to stack up. So, and it's varied, combine some of these and apply it to a market. It's just so varied in different markets. So when we were looking at how, markets are looking to solve for these cross-border payments, we specifically honed in on the bilateral arrangements of where two countries are linking their instant payment systems. And these have been, initiatives that have really taken off in Asia in a big way. I think Asia really pioneered these bilateral linkages. But the G20 and the CPMI have really been kind of promoting those as one of the solutions that can really support the G20 targets on cross-border payments. And so taking that inspiration of bilaterals, and I know that everybody, I'm not going to speak for my fellow panelists. I do know that there's a lot of countries actually that are talking about bilaterals and we're now experimenting with the multilateral. So taking the inspiration of the bilateral structures, we then looked at Project Nexus, incubated that project in the BIS Innovation Hub from the idea to a prototype or a proof of concept, a working prototype. And now we're at the stage where we've agreed with 5 central banks, or frankly, 5 central banks have come together to agree that they want to take it to implementation. So Nexus now is in the early stages of trying to take it into the real world. And it's a multilateral system where 5 countries at this stage will look to connect their instant payment systems on a multilateral basis through a hub. And so that's the kind of an attempt to look at how can we streamline cross-border payments for retail consumers. Now we know some of the studies you would have seen spoke about how retail cross-border payments are increasing. So this the retail cross-border payment has been a focus for many. Now. The first thing I would say on a multilateral approach versus bilateral versus, in fact, all the other solutions that are out there, whether it's closed-loop solutions, the various fintechs that are playing in this space and have been doing a good job. This is one solution that complements what's out there, and it has to be a combination of these solutions to actually solve the cross-border payments issue because of all of the dynamics that I mentioned earlier. But if we were to compare bilaterals with multilaterals, just to hone in on that in particular, I'll start with the challenges of a multilateral approach because we've done a lot of work on designing the blueprint in the last phase 3, before we can even get to a point of these 5 central banks, India included, having the confidence to want to take it to implementation. And the challenges are that you get 5 parties around the table to negotiate what would the connection look like. You've got instant payment systems that are different in different countries, from something as big as how it's owned, what is the ownership structure, to what are the transaction limits on what you can send through the system. So there are these diverse elements that we need to think through from a technical perspective, from a regulatory framework perspective. We need to think of what is the scheme that prevails, what are the governance arrangements, and even from the point of view of the commercial side, what is the incentive for everybody to want to come in and actually be part of this multilateral system? These are questions that aren't easy, And the only reason we were able to move ahead is because there's a shared strategy for these countries to want to do this. So there was a real will to want to do this. The benefits on the other side is the number one most important benefit that we constantly hear is that bilaterals aren't scalable. And so this is a scalable solution. Nexus hopefully will grow beyond the 5. We are having really, really active conversations on the growth of Nexus geographically, as well as product, as well as enhancing what it does. But the scalability is the most crucial point. The last point I will make on the benefits is also bringing together 5 central banks and potentially more to think through some of the issues that exist in cross-border payments. There's much more of an incentive to want to actually solve for it and deliver it. And we saw that in phase 3, where we looked at sanction screenings and how can we harmonize what we do there, and they've agreed to some of these changes. So there's a real kind of platform for regulators to come together and solve some of the thorny issues with that incentive to make the structure better. Thank you.
Great, I think great insight. I think the audience is also excited, the Nexus thing, I think many of us, we know very little about Nexus, and knowing about the multilateral approach, of course the challenges are going to be there, the regulators are different, the currencies are different, technologies are different, but we'll be looking forward to that in future, how you'll be solving that. Probably will be good to hear next year when you'll come again for the GFF, to see the updated version of that. Similarly, Mr. Mehdi, I think from the network and regional perspective, you do something similar. I'm not a technical what Nexus is doing, but you are like present as a Arab Monetary Fund, and I wanted to understand, as a Buna, as a network, right? The regional now for the last 3 years, and there are over 100 institutes are connected. So this is a great achievement that I feel to you. How do you see the challenges in building the standardized approach to a unified cross-border payment system, and how do you have approached this subject to conquer these challenges? Because I guess some of your suggestion would actually help the entire industry over here to handle those major challenges.
Yeah, thank you, Nehal. So, yeah, we have a few things in common with Nexus, but we are not exactly like Nexus. What we have clearly in common is the fact that we are, both of us, focusing on cross-border only. So we don't cover domestic payments. Our aim is to bring a solution to a cross-border payment. But nevertheless, our objective is not to speak about cross-border payment anymore. The objective is to remove the distinction between cross-border and domestic payment by bringing the same efficiency that exists in domestic payment to the cross-border dimension. How to achieve that? By applying also the same solutions. So putting a payment system in the middle and onboarding financial institutions directly in the system and process payment between them without intermediary from the sending to the receiving bank in multi-currency. So simple solution that has proven to be efficient and effective in domestic space, and try to apply it in the cross-border dimension. Technically, there are no challenges into that. Again, solution exists. Building such a system has been achieved at domestic level. There is no reason why it cannot achieve it in the cross-border space. What are the challenges? So if you do such an approach, if you follow such an approach, it means that we need to build a new cross-border community. So this is how it works at domestic level. There is a community, there is one regulator, there is one solution, there are stakeholders that know how to collaborate together, there is one single regulatory framework, there are financial institutions used to work together, which is not the case in the cross-border space. So all this is to be built across multiple jurisdictions. You need to get regulators working together, you need to get them familiar with the approach, you need to get some of them approving to include their currency as settlement currency in your solution. You need also financial institutions with different practices, different culture, different standards to collaborate together and agree on one single standard that you will apply, not only for processing payment, also for compliance. It has been mentioned a few times. Yes, you need to build a new standard for compliance for such a solution and have all your participants adhering to it. This is the challenge. So it requires a specific position, it requires a lot of communication, interaction with multiple jurisdictions, and cover the two aspects that we very often refer to, discussion with public sector, but also the private sector, and get the two of them collaborating together to reach a common objective. So this is consuming a lot of our time, but the challenge in our view lays there. Once achieved, once the ball starts rolling, and we see indeed regulators supporting such an initiative, not just the one of your region, but also from outside the region, the Arab region, because we do not only process in Arab currencies, we have also two international currency with the euro and the dollars. So to get, again here, the ECB and the Fed, the US Treasury, supporting the inclusion of their currency in Buna, it has required a certain years of discussion and efforts and explanation of the model to have them familiar with the inclusion of their currency. And this does not stop once the currency is included. On the contrary, you need to continue building and maintaining such a confidence and increasing the incentive for others to include their currencies as well. Interlinking, yes, it has been mentioned also a few times. We are open to a coexistence of different approach on our side. So the way we designed our system makes it flexible to either bilateral or multilateral approach. We have multiple discussion, including with almost everyone here on the stage, and we'll be happy to bring as many of them as is possible into live operations.
It's so great to hear from you, and in the secret sauce, your system, how it does integrate with all the systems. So I think we'd love to hear from you some of the time, but that's of course a trade, maybe a secret to you, whether you would want to reveal, but I will come back to you on that. Going back again on the fintech perspective, Mr. Ambar, sir. So one of the key aspects that the regulator would be looking at the compliance checks and the transparency for the cross-border payments. What are your thoughts about this? And if you could also briefly touch upon the role the fintechs in enabling level playing fields between the financial institutions and fintechs, and how do you see this collaboration in your view helping conquering these cross-border challenges?
The business of remittances or cross-border payments is the business of compliance, right? I think compliance is right on top, and unless you're getting that right, you're not going to exist. We've seen many companies come and go, but you have to get your compliance right, which is also the difference between, sometimes the difference between digital and cash, where on the digital side, compliance is high. When we look at transfers, digital transfers between banks, wallets, a lot of these instruments are already KYC'd. So it helps us on the compliance side. We as a B2B provider very often can see both sides of the transaction. So somebody sending money from Dubai or New York to somebody, let's say a wallet in Kenya. I know the KYC status of the wallet in Kenya. I know the KYC status of the wallet on the other side. In many cases, the sending party does not have access to KYC data on the receive side. The receive side doesn't have access to KYC data on the send side. And we have that. And as a fintech, we see patterns. We see the same guy using his driver's license in one shop, his passport in another shop, and some other ID in another shop. We can correlate these things. And fintech helps in that. We're working towards that. But ultimately, yes, compliance is the biggest enabler or impairment for cross-border payments. Until we get that right, we cannot bring the cost down, right? And fintechs are doing their bit on that.
Definitely, and I'm sure you must be having a tough fight with the regulators managing all these regions that you are doing the cross-border payments. Coming back to the operator, the real-time payments, Mr. Yan, wanted to understand the real-time cross-border payments are gaining scale. And do you believe that the real-time payment backed with a sound technology, right, that enable affordable real-time cross-border payments, while also briefly touching upon the disparate protocols and standards in the domestic payments network to integrate at scale?
Sure. So first of all, I think regulation. That's a good point. I think there will always be regulatory challenges. Thankfully, I didn't study hard enough to be a regulator, so I think I will leave it to them. But I'm a practical guy, operator, as you mentioned. So I think, again, just to repeat, the biggest contribution a national payment platform can do is to have a very robust, solid, ubiquitous, real-time solution domestically. And then I think the next step is to connect it to Nexus, Buna, whatever it is, and kind of gain the, the reach and cross-border. As Mehdi mentioned, sometimes, unfortunately, Nexus and Buna and others take years of discussions because it's very complex. So then the question is, okay, what does a central infrastructure in a country do in the meantime? And there are two areas kind of in my mind, again, from a practical perspective. One is trying to help with the technology, and then the other one is settlement, because again, the regulation will cause some costs and KYC and all of that stuff, but how can we make the the cross-border settlement, the Forex kind of cheaper, and how can we deal with the tech? So the example of UAE and India, the APIs exist, everything is there. Few years back, we started talking with a lot of anticipation about ISO 20022 and everything, being compliant. Well, UPI is not using ISO 20022 and everybody connects to you anyways, right? So I think from a technology perspective these days, assuming that you have the right data fields on each side, you can always put a little bit of a translator from one language to another. And what I see is it's not only about the financial message, right? The example I use that when I send money from a wallet in the UAE, the non-financial leg, getting the name back, right? Getting the information which the regulator and the regulation may require for KYC, that's actually where it comes. So, and even QR codes. Imagine that you scan a QR code in India. Of course, your app, which is from UAE, has to understand this QR code or route it back to. So there are a lot of kind of technical things. If the market already sorted some of these solutions, like between UAE and India, I don't think there is much more to do. Yes, we could centralize the APIs and offer them as a utility to everyone else to use, sure. But I think our role is more where the corridors are not built up yet, right? So as it was said, there are some corridors where the market hasn't picked it up, and us as a national infrastructure, we could build, similar APIs with Bangladesh. And then the biggest discussion, which is probably in my mind the largest overall challenge of remittances, is to fight the commercial models of the existing players, right? So foreign exchange, that's a big thing, right? All these players, they make a lot of money on Forex. And you have models, right? Within GCC for ATM withdrawals and point of sale payments, the central banks actually stepped in and they created these settlement pools with each other and they do it. I don't think that's a solution for every single corridor, but probably something to think about. And will you leave the market making and the Forex to, everyone, or with the geopolitical situation, would the regulators want to limit that to just certain number of banks? So I think technically, yes, we can help, but the other area where the money can be reduced is trying to put more pressure on the spread on Forex.
Thank you for that insight. We learned that the technology can be molded. Technology is not something that you see that as a challenge. More that you're seeing is the approach and the standardization. To that point, to Ms. Maha, I wanted to understand, how do you see the role of a multilateral platform or schemes like Nexus in driving the greater standardization in cross-border payment processes? And in this view of the fact that all the countries may have different regulations and operational procedures, which increases complexity and the cost of cross-border payments, is it their view of evolving to solve such challenges already?
Yeah, I think it's interesting we talk about how technology is there and it can solve the problem, and you're absolutely right, it can. But on the other hand, I kind of want to caveat that a little bit, because whilst we say that, it's still hard. If you look at the implementation of ISO 20022, it's not really harmonized, and so it's possible to be harmonized, it just doesn't happen. So the technology, the solution is there, the implementation is also is always a difficult part. Regulation then and compliance processes and what I call the integrity of the financial system, all of these processes, because they're disparate and they're encoded in legislation, sometimes very difficult to dislodge, that's a really, I mean, a lot of the conversations with bilaterals or multilaterals tend to really focus on the compliance, the regulatory frameworks, the legal frameworks, more so. And you hear that time and time again from those who've done bilateral linkages. So there's no doubt that that is an area that needs to be tackled. What can a structure like Nexus do? Well, I mean, I said earlier that it can create that platform for parties to really have an incentive to want to come together and solve some of these really thorny issues and then implement them. And so it can potentially look at kind of moving the dial further. This is going to be kind of a multi-pronged approach on how we can tackle these sorts of issues, which have been going on, the conversation's been going on for a long, long time. And so that's one thing that this platform, a platform like Nexus, can do. The fact that information can be shared, the network effects that it can build, means that we can potentially get access to further information to tackle some of the fraud, scam, concerns that regulators have, and we can use that the platform from that perspective. I just don't think that that alone is the answer. It's not going to be the answer. What we really need to think about is taking the core of the issue and trying to solve it. Now, at the Innovation Hub, we use technologies to try and enhance the financial system, new technologies, experimentation, innovation, proof of concept, working with central banks and regulators to look at some of these, problems in the financial system, should I say, and use technologies to solve them. So we took the compliance issue as an area of concern that no one's, we talk about a lot, and there's different experiments, but we haven't really been able to push the agenda. And we've created a project, or we're in the midst of a project called Project Mandala, which looks at streamlining and automating compliance checks, using new technologies, a decentralized structure, and encoding jurisdiction-specific compliance checks, actually, such that it can be done automatically with the transaction in a privacy-preserving method, right? And then a proof is generated and it can travel with the transaction. So there's a lot of potential with thinking about how new technologies can actually enhance existing processes to solve for this problem. On the FX clearing and settlement, I mean, that's a hard question. When we start to talk about more illiquid currencies, it becomes even harder. And again, one of our projects we've just launched now, Project Rialto, looks at how can we, design an FX component that that can kind of, link to a retail cross-border payment system and have wholesale CBDCs as a safe settlement asset. So using new technologies to enhance existing, I think this is the sort of thing that we need to start to think about. Just doing cross-border payments or a multilateral approach is probably not going to be enough. A multi-pronged approach and a real desire to want to move the dial on these things amongst regulators and the market. I mean, that great point around, the commercial element and trying to really, push the commercial banks forward to kind of work. That public-private partnership is going to be really important.
Thanks. That's a great perspective to hear from you. My question, I think, because of the time, to Mr. Manaa, I wanted to ask you, how do you see the role of an efficient payment network in integrating domestic payments, and your thoughts on evolution of an efficient cross-border payments journey? In case of a Buna, this becomes more critical since you integrate with the financial institutions directly.
Yeah, I mean, the integration with the financial institution directly, as I mentioned, the challenge I think I covered in the previous my previous answer. Maybe I can complement with the reference that was made by Maha and Jan on the commercial models, because this is another challenge that is the real one I did not cover. Because getting the community moving together means that they need to change their practices in terms of commercial models, and that takes a lot of time. So even if you bring real value to them, even they are convinced by that value, they will not change overnight. They will not change overnight, so you have to brace and hold your breathing for a period of time and have enough funds to sustain the time that it requires to get the different financial institutions moving to your new approach little by little. When it comes to the cross-border, I mean more the interlinking dimension, as Jan said, and I agree with his approach, as a domestic system you need to resolve your domestic problems first. You need to provide answer to all the domestic needs first. And then possibly move to the cross-border. But that has an implication, that by resolving your national needs, you provide national solutions as well. You implement national rules, national practices, and then the step to the cross-border is not that easy. It's not that easy anymore. It's a real challenge, and very often it's the obstacle that we face. So many of our interlocutors, when we speak about interlinking, have started as domestic solutions, and it takes a bit of time to try to align and to get something in the middle between what exists already in the domestic market and what can be achieved at the cross-border level.
Great, I think great to hear from you, and definitely now I see a clear intent from the thought leaders that we have on this panel that really want to solve the cross-border payment challenges, though not right, not today, tomorrow, but in future for sure. I think we'll be able to come to that solution. We definitely touch base, and the thoughts, the idea that has come from the leadership, the panel that here, so they have touched base on the cost, they have touched base on the tech, they have touched base on the approach that you want to solve that, the collaboration and the coverage that, what we're looking at. So I feel, I see that everything is covered in this point of the topic of discussion, unless if there is any question, if we have time. But, okay, so we don't have any time, but we thank you everyone for listening to us patiently, and thank you very much the panelists for giving the great thoughts on this topic.